Did everyone have that downpour like a monsoon? Oh, okay.
Notice how everybody got really quiet the minute she started recording.
Okay, all right. I got you on tape.
Hey, Jackie.
Okay. All right, 3 in the waiting room. Okay. Good evening, Wendy. It's Fern Cantor here.
Hi, Fern. Nice to see you. I like your haircut.
Thank you. Thank you. And you always look lovely. Okay,
Thank you.
I think we are going to get started because Shelly has a lot to say about a fabulous movie. First of all, we want to welcome Shelly, and for those of you who may not know anything about him, which I don't think is any of us, he's founder or host for Cafe Cinematheque International. He does theatrical and academic venues throughout South Florida, and are you still the lifelong learning series at FAU?
Yes.
And Florida International University. In addition to his exclusive cruises, he served as the film expert for Celebrity Cruise Lines during the annual voyage to the Cannes International Film Festival. For all of you who love seeing Shelly, I just want to tell you that we are thrilled to say that he will be back in the fall with a whole new series for the Stirling Friends. So let's give him a hand for that. Thank you.
Hooray.
Thank you, Shelly. I also want to tell you that, remind all of you that on September 20th is our annual meeting for the Friends of the Stirling Road Library, and we want you all to be there. We would love to have you there. I have arranged to have Howard Finkelstein, help me Howard, is going to be our guest presenter that evening. And we've all known Help Me Howard for the last almost 25 years. He is doing so much for the community. So that's going to be on, I think it's Tuesday, as Susan, it's Tuesday the 20th, September 20th, starting at 6:30 p.m. I'm still admitting people, so they're coming in by the droves, Shelly.
Yeah.
Yes. I also want to ask you, so I'm telling you about the annual meeting, and I would like all of you right now to, if you would please go to mute so that we don't hear phones, toilets flushing, all that other stuff in the background while Shelly's talking. And then at the end, we can unmute when Shelly advises us, okay? So from Fern Cantor and the Friends of the Stirling Road Branch Library, it is really my pleasure to introduce Shelly Isaacs.
Thank you, Fern. Good evening, everybody. So nice to see familiar faces, even familiar names. It's good to be back. This is the last in this series, and I always like to end the series on an up note, as you have already seen. This film from India, English, VInglish, great title. It's from 2012. It won the Academy Award, the Indian Academy Award for Best First Time Director. Her name is Gauri Shinde. She also wrote the screenplay. I'll tell you a little more about her later. Anyway, the story is a gentle, sometimes hilarious, and affecting one of culture clash and one woman's awakening of self-respect and the gaining of dignity. That's a big thing in India, especially for a woman. Anyway, it is a Bollywood film, but not the typical Bollywood film. For those of you who know what Bollywood films are all about, they're usually films that run, fortunately this one didn't, they usually run about 3 hours or more. They usually have exuberant musical interludes. All of a sudden in the middle of the film, even if it's a drama, the characters drop everything and people come in and start singing and dancing. It has nothing to do with the rest of the story. It's as if it's a commercial. But it's just part of the culture of India, because people come to the movies and they come for a day. When they go to the movies, they pack big bags of food. They eat in the aisles, and they expect long entertainments. And anyway, the storylines usually in Bollywood films take an extremely chaste approach, although that too has been changing. If you watch Netflix, they take an extremely chaste approach to conjugal relations and extramarital temptation. And they have a crowd-pleasing wrap-up that allows the lead character to be all she can be while still respecting family values. This is the traditional arc of the traditional Indian Bollywood film. But this one makes it a little different, A, because of the location, and B, because of the story and the storyteller. Anyway, the film begins in Pune. Pune is a region of India. It is called the Oxford of the East. It's interesting that she sets it there. It's called the Oxford of the East. It is a hub of educational institutes, manufacturing, and of the auto industry in India, as well as a high-tech center. More than half the international students going to school in India study there. It's also the place where badminton was invented. Believe it or not, you learned something new today. Badminton was invented there. Anyway, in this tale of female empowerment, Sashi is as we've seen, is an upper middle class homemaker who sells laddus. Laddus, that is, those laddus, as you've seen, are a popular sweet for festive occasions and religious festivals. That's really where they do the most, serving of a laddu, usually at weddings and bar mitzvahs. From her home, she makes them in her home. Her husband and daughter mock her for her inability to grasp English, and her young son loves her just the way she is. It is a nicely put together family. There's even the mother-in-law living in the house with them. This is again traditionally Indian. When her family is invited to her older sister's daughter's wedding in New York, she goes alone to prepare. And through this series of events and newfound relationships, Sashi will be transformed before her family and the world, finding her inner strength to stand up, and be counted. The scenes at the beginning, we see her being put down in the house. Her daughter and husband speak English. They make fun of her for not understanding them or not speaking English. And even when she takes her to school, we have that scene. And she's such an honest person that even the teacher lights up to her. And her daughter feels embarrassed. And this is something she's finding, on the way home. Even the daughter says, how could you do that? How could you offer him things like that? Anyway, what follows, there are so many scenes that highlight the story, that highlight the film. And it's really the cinematography that provides an interesting view of New York for India's audiences. We have to sort of understand that this film is made for Indian audiences. It really wasn't made for here. Well, it was made for Indian audiences here in America as well, but specifically an Indian audience. And they're seeing, they see a New York that's clean and bright, although they see New Yorkers, some for who they are, others for being not who they are. During her flight, however, Sashi is given inspirational advice by a fellow passenger. That fellow passenger is very funny when he's describing the film to her, when they're sitting in the seat, and he yells out, "There's a bomb!" And everybody reacts to him. It's a good piece of humor, but it is also, I have to tell you, a cameo by who is today India's greatest actor. His name is Amitabh Bachchan, and he is considered their greatest actor. He's in a number of films you'll see on Netflix. He's a wonderful comic actor as well as a great dramatic actor. He really does a lot of different kinds of characterizations, and he, because of the star of the film, he agreed to play a cameo for her. Anyway, during her flight, she gets the advice. She arrives. and she has, she meets her sister, and the next day goes out to New York, and she has a traumatic experience at a cafe where the waitress is rude to her, and her inability to communicate in English, causing an accident. She's comforted by a good-looking young guy while she's sitting on the bench, who will turn out to be our chef Laurent, who happened to be queuing up behind her at the cafe, as he himself is weak in English and tells him how he understands. And he is a character that comes back to us later on. I love it the way she sees the English class on the bus. Everything follows through naturally in this film. But now we see her in New York. We see the bus pass with an ad for the English class, which she reacts to and calls up the English class and decides to go. And this English class provides a motley crew, a Greek chorus, if you will, from all over the world, who she meets and bonds with. And they provide much of the comedy in the film. It also, again, offers Indian audiences a look at the diversity of a country. India is not as diverse as this. So for them, this is giving them a look at the US in a diverse way, but not just from an immigration point of view, also through the individual personalities. They all come to life in the film. We have David, the teacher, who is apparently gay, and we learn more about later on. There's Eva, the Mexican nanny, who's there just so her child the child she's raising doesn't just speak Spanish, because they're not necessarily a Mexican family. There's Salman, who is a Pakistani cab driver, who's always hitting on Yu Song, the Chinese hairstylist. And then there's Ramamurthy, who is a Tamil, meaning he's from Sri Lanka, a Tamil software engineer, and Udumki, an African Caribbean, who sits silently and who will eventually himself come out to the class. And of course, there is Laurent, who becomes attracted to Sashi, and that provides, within the structure of the film, some interpersonal drama as well as tension in the story. The students of the English class also act as a support system for Sashi, who, despite her own dedication, finds that complacency has slipped into her marriage, and there's self-respect lacking in her relationship with her teenage daughter as well as her husband. In Laurent, the Frenchman's attraction for her, she's able to rediscover her own self-worth. Equipped with his attention and her now newfound knowledge of English, she finds the wings to soar. It's no surprise that by the end of the film, after all we go through, Sashi will conquer her fears. But the route the director takes to get her there is distinctively her own. Seeing New York is through her point of view. The image of the newly confident Sashi striding down a Manhattan street, a takeout coffee in her hand, and that trench coat belted over her sari, interestingly enough, will make you smile long after you leave the film. Ultimately, what makes English memorable are the small step-by-step choices that Sashi makes to transform herself. Yes, there's grit in the film, but it's tempered with compassion and dignity. The way the character has been crafted by the director and interpreted by the star, she is gloriously feminine and uniquely Indian. The result is a sweet, sensitive, and superlative film that makes you laugh. It makes you cry and smile. The end scene is the last scene in the film. It takes its turns when she drops the ladus and can't go to the English class, makes the new ladus, and who shows up? The whole class, even Laurent. After they're seen on the roof when she runs off. You sit there and you're hoping, is she going to kiss the guy? Is she going to run off with this guy? No, she's not. And when he shows up, he's very polite and sees what he's losing, as does she. Anyway, she makes that wonderful speech at the end of the film, which makes everybody teary-eyed. And I love it when David stands up and announces she's won her certificate with distinction, and everybody's smiling. Every emotion in the film is identifiable on all the characters' parts. Every nuance is balanced within the film. Considering it's a debut film by a young woman, she did an exceptional job putting this together, especially because it's shot on 2 continents by an Indian director, although she did go to school in the United States. The characters are real. The performances are effortless. It clearly expresses the idea of shared experience from different cultural perspectives, as does the food itself. I mean, I love that Laurent is a chef and he shares his recipes with her. It makes for a nice, it has elements of rom-com in it, but it doesn't take that course. David's sexual orientation highlights the need for acceptance and tolerance, which the class does, which then extends on to Dempke towards the end. The story was inspired, I will tell you now, the story was inspired by Shindy, the director's mother. She was a Marathi-speaking woman who ran her own pickle business from her house in Pune. Her mother was not fluent in English, which embarrassed Shinda as a child. And in an interview for the film at a festival, she came out and said, I made this film to say sorry, that I'm so sorry to my mother. So it was an apology. The film was set up as an apology for her mother. The actress in the film, Sri Devi, is wonderful. I don't know about you, but she reminds me of Audrey Hepburn. Her whole look had that feeling to it, but she is the backbone to the story. The anxiety, the anger, the arrogance, the anguish, the attraction that she conveys with her emotions. She does it all with her face, done effortlessly, with or without words. She doesn't have to say anything. Her smile says it all. And this was returning to the screen after a 15-year hiatus. She had taken 15 years off. She began her career as a child actress at the age of 4. And this was at taking 15 years off. This was her first film back. The music is situational. We get a lot of songs in the film, but they're an integral part of the movie, where the songs are really more situational in nature. They flow naturally out of the scene without disturbing the narrative. They actually advance the narrative for us, and they give us a chance to do montages of the city. If you know New York, she really shoots a lot of the stores, a lot of the streets. She really captures the flavor of New York. As I said, Sri Devi does a beautiful job. I will have to tell you, sadly, she passed away in 2018 at the age of 55. She had an accident while staying in Dubai and passed away. And this was not her final. It was our next to final performance. And for her performance in this film, she received unanimous praise from the critics and the country as well. So it is a fun film filled with a lot of little nuances about immigration, about dignity, about respect for the other. And we have a whole class of others in this film, is what makes it interesting for Indians to see. I mean, imagine being Indian and seeing the US this way. It sort of should make them feel good about wanting to coming to New York, if not the US. It becomes like a travel log for them. So there you have a rundown on the film, but I'm curious as to your feelings about it. And we'll get to that right now. I see hands up already. Jim, I see your little hand was up there first. And then Linda, I saw yours. Go ahead.
Good evening. It was a delightful film, Shelly, as you've said, and you've outlined it beautifully. And the two major themes that I really reacted to, one was how appropriate the music was and
Yes.
embellishing either the emotions or a critical juncture. It was the most appropriate score to augment this type of movie I've ever seen. And it was a delightful film. Additionally,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
no, that's okay. I'll when you wrap up, I'll do it. Go ahead.
Okay. And the other thing is that the lens through which the camera explored the family around a wedding, which is the typical thing, really the focus was so different that it's really not the bride and the groom, the travails with the family and all the nonsense that typically goes on, the drama, I should say, and not the nonsense, but that it was a woman and her difficulties and challenges within the family, and the journey she took quite by chance, and she had no idea where this was leading, but she allowed herself to partake as they nudged her along, and she didn't block the opportunity that something might happen. And since it came through that lens, it was a completely different way to look at the typical wedding issues around Indian families and preparation and development. It was just lovely.
That's a very good comment. Yes, knowing that Indian weddings take 3 days, first of all,
Mhm.
and this was set up. It also showed, not just the class and her assimilating into the class, but also this was a family that assimilated into the U.S. by still maintaining certain Indian values, but because the daughter was marrying an American, not an Indian. And we see that family coming to the wedding and welcoming her into their family and vice versa. So it really was a worldview film. And she was a great role model. I mean, when we think about this would be seen in India, she's a great role model for women. Women are second-class citizens in India. They do have to fight for their place, not just in the family, but in the world. So this was a great example for them. So it was terrific. And that's a great comment about the music, because the soundtrack, soundtracks for films like this come out usually a month or two before the film. It's very interesting. In India, they release the hits, so-called, from the film, which will gather interest for the film. And this was a #1 selling soundtrack in India. It sold millions of copies before the film came out. So it built up the audience coming in. So it's a great comment. Yeah.
One other quick comment, if I can. The other thing that was very, I think, engaging was the issues about class and education, because it occurred in a natural setting. It occurred within the family and within the parents of the bride, and it didn't get hit over the head with a hammer, but it was certainly the issue that was being presented.
Yes. Very matter of factly, the other daughter was going to NYU. I mean, they really show, this assimilation, this idea of education. Everything is shown, in a practical way that isn't hard for them to understand, to digest in India, certainly.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. Where are you, Linda? Yes, Linda.
We discussed the music quite a bit. That was one of my points. I just love the music. I love the movie. The thing that I was going to ask about was, I noticed in the film, it wasn't bright. It kind of was a muted color. I don't know if that was intentionally done, and if it was, it was something different for me anyway. There was never a bright scene, that was always muted. And I thought it really was very appropriate for the sense of that movie. The other thing is, I saw a movie many years ago. It was called Shirley Valentine.
Yes.
It's totally different, but the similarity is how the husband was asking for his tea and the daughter was kind of bratty, and she decided she's had enough of this. And I think she went to one of the Greek islands.
Yes, she did.
Yeah. And that I thought was really quite nice and similar. And the other thing is just to see New York with its frenetic pace, and see all those scenes. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed.
it was wonderful. I thought they really did a good job shooting New York in the
Yes,
film.
they did.
Interesting for an Indian film. This is a totally Indian film to take it all out of its regular venue and do it this way. I thought it was terrific. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Wendy.
Yes, I enjoyed the visuals. I loved her saris, and I loved the cooking that she did for her husband. And I thought there's a very humanistic message in this film. And in New York and certainly Miami, there are so many people who are learning to speak English, and they're trying real hard. And so many people really are unkind, and they're rude, and they're nasty to them. And I think we all need to take a second look at this. And when you do encounter people who are struggling with a language, be kind, be patient, and know that they're really in the depths of a very difficult time. And I give them so much credit because they're trying and they're learning. And the other thing I feel is food is love. And when she was making these lacoons for her family, she did it with love. And the chef that she met, he cooked with love. And love is when you give to people by giving them food. It's a very basic thing to do.
Very Jewish then.
That's that's terrific. No, you're absolutely right.
It's
And that is a
humanistic.
good, it's funny, but each time you have to flip the film and you have to understand, this is being seen in India. This is for their culture. So it's the same message, because if they speak Hindi in India and they're approached by, they don't speak English. So then somebody who's English comes to them, they also have to be aware and be open, which they are usually, by the way, I will tell you. But it is, and food definitely is part of the message of the film. It is part of the message of the love. Thank you. Rachel.
Yes, okay. So I loved the movie. I thought it was wonderful. And that scene in the coffee shop when that hurt me so bad because my dad was also an immigrant, and to see somebody being so nasty, and everybody's like saying, come on, move the line. And she's doing all these coffee options. And, coming from an American standpoint, coffee is just, to other cultures, coffee is just coffee. But here in America, do you want Americano? Do you want a cappuccino? Do you want this? And it's overwhelming. So it was so nice to see a perspective of how overwhelming, not just in the language, but our culture that we take for granted. It's like for a person to come from India to New York, that is a culture shock. It really is, and to get assimilated without losing your own identity of who you are. I thought it was a very good movie.
Yeah, thank you. They're great comments. Yes, I mean, I could tell you when I first went to Starbucks, I was like her. I mean, they all of a sudden they invented name your coffee. And I just wanted coffee, it's all of this stuff. But you're right, it could be very confusing and scary for someone. Also it was nice though, because they really mixed up the film. When she goes to take the train, the guard at the path station helps her understand how to use it, and he's there every day, and finally she has a relationship with him. He sees her and recognizes her as a person. I mean, these are the little nuances of film that make it special, that say people can understand others, the other. There are those that don't, and there are those that do. And it is important. It is important. Thank you. Okay, Dora.
Yes, Shelly, I love the movie. I really do. And being an immigrant myself, so no, I love that her self-worth, at the end, because she felt like she was like a piece of furniture in her house. her husband hardly spoke to her, did not embrace her like, when she said that he met this somebody from his office and embraced this woman, and he never embraced her. So she was really, she showed her value. And at the end, he realizes what she really was. And so she said, "Do you still love me?" Because he knew that, maybe he's losing her, because I think she also had an empathy with that French guy. I felt like
Yes.
maybe she wasn't kind of in love, but first it was her family, her tradition, and she wouldn't run away. But I
Right.
think she because she felt like this French guy really understood her and knew her value as a person, opposed to, that's what they show, opposed to her husband, who just took her for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, she felt, she felt desired, which her husband wasn't giving her. And I think that was important for her.
Right.
And she realized, of course, she can't. And when she makes that speech, she should have slipped him a Mickey Ledoux, to wake him up.
Yeah, right.
But so who knows, you can only hope that he is going to wake up. And I
Yeah.
think you respect, the fact that she did this on her own, and
Right.
made the speech, was very important for her. And it's important for anyone watching to say, you can do this. It's not that difficult a task. It just takes a little risk and adventure. And you wind up on the right side. So yes, thank you, Dora. Susan Litt.
Okay. I guess I have a different perspective. As much as I enjoyed the film, I taught English as a second language for over 30 years. And I still do work in that field as a volunteer. So I just want to make sure everybody knows it's not possible to learn a language in 4 weeks. So, I went to Costa Rica to work on Spanish. I had done Spanish in high school and done 5 years of Spanish. And in the 3 weeks I was there, I barely improved. So, you've got to realize that this movie was based on an incongruent concept. Okay.
It's actually,
yeah.
it's actually part of the structure of the film is there is, I don't know if you've heard the expression, but there is the suspension of disbelief. You have to suspend your disbelief when you see film, especially a film like this. It's okay. This is exceptional.
So I have a question for you, though. The whole concept of her having done this and kept it a secret. Why? Is that part of the culture, or was that just her own personality? Tell me why you think she.
Well, I think it's a combination. It's a combination of things. Is that her sneaking away to take the lessons? If her sister finds out, they might slip it to her husband, and he certainly wouldn't be in favor of it. So I think it's really out of fear that she's keeping it secret. Also because she wants to surprise everyone at the wedding. She's going to let them have it. It's also, the script itself, the storyline itself, making it work that way makes it a great surprise at the end for everybody involved. It's following a traditional structure, if you will. It also defies traditional structure because, in comedy, especially comedies like this, there is what they call the meet cute, and she and Lauren meet cute at the coffee shop. So you figure when they meet cute, there's going to be a romance. And although there seems to be one, it never really comes to fruition,
right?
Because of the culture. So it's just interesting how she takes that structure and then defies it. Is also refreshing within the film itself. So that's why. Why.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, thank you. Susan Metch,
Unmute, Susan. There you go.
there you
I
go.
just did, thanks, Fern. I was going to just say that the coffee scene in the beginning really reminded me of a Friends incident, the series Friends with the soup Nazi, where you had absolutely right away, snap, snap, snap. And that's such a New York, they consider it a New York personality. You get in line and you've got to know what you want. You're holding up the
Yeah.
world, and that's it. But the part that was really good, that when he gave her the coffee and then he later showed up at the class, is that didn't deter her from going and getting started in her English class. And I thought that was wonderful. I really liked the movie. To me, it's a woman finding herself, and she was really doing it in a way for herself, that
Yes.
she would be respected and not treated like a doormat or somebody that, quote, stupid. And it was teenagers are very disrespectful in nature. If they're finding their own way, it's life. But when you're saying something to your friend, you say, oh, don't bother, my mother can't understand. It was like, oh boy, that's it. It was like my hairs on my head went up. My kids used to think that I had eyes and back on my head. I knew what was going on. But the fact is that's what really was beautiful. And I loved when she spoke at the end, where he got up to speak for her because she couldn't do it.
Yes.
He patted his hand, and
I love that.
it was the most beautiful moment to me, that she
Agreed.
had the impetus to do that. And you picked a wonderful movie to end this part of our series, Shelley. So I think it was beautiful, and thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. It's wonderful. You're absolutely right. The soup knots, I love it. The last scene, is on the plane, and you gotta love that too, because she's gonna ask for the New York Times. She's sitting there and she goes, "I'll take a New York," and then she stops and goes for the Hindi paper so that she doesn't insult him. Okay. I'm not going to rub it in. She's not going to rub it into him. And I thought that was cute. I thought that was a sweet moment in the film. Thank you, Susan. Jackie and Larry.
We really enjoyed it, and it was awfully nice to end on a high note. Sometimes you just get bombarded with heavy, 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 and this was really nice. But I thought they all were trying to better themselves. It wasn't just a movie about her trying to better herself. It was everybody in the class. And my favorite part was how they communicated. And I thought that was so important. The whole movie for me was about respect and communication, and that goes hand in hand. And the two of them, Laurent and Sashi, they communicated in their own languages, and the other understood. And I loved that. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great, yes, that's a whole other level of the film, is communication, because her family wasn't communicating with her. Her husband, there's an emotional distance as well between her husband and her because of that lack, and his thinking down on her. And then there's all the communication going on within the class when they get words gobbled up and ideas. I thought it was very, very, very interesting the way the director dealt with that. I thought she wrote an absolutely wonderful screenplay because of that, dealing with the levels of communication, the levels of empowerment. So there's a lot of issues that came up in the film. That's terrific. Thank you. Okay, Marilyn and Mel.
Okay, first of all, we loved the movie, and we really thank you for the selection. But in a funny way, Mel and I have become very involved with the Indian community. Because our son, when he was 16, came home and he told us that his best friend is an Indian who just moved into the community. This was suburbia. And the parents of this young man called us and said, would you meet with us? We'd love to learn about America. And I'm sorry, and how to bring up a teenage boy. That's what that with them. Now, both parents were physicians, still are. And we sat and we had coffee together and tea. And the questions were wonderful. And want to know exactly just what to expect from a boy of 16. So I said, well, how long have you been living here in America? Oh, 16 years. So
Wow.
Well, but what we learned is that the Indian community, at least this is very much a part, we were in Rockland County in New York, but there's a large community in New Jersey, and they stay together, and they're very proud of one another. But the point is, they wanted to learn about America. Now, by the way, this young boy who was 6.
Oops. She froze.
now.
Oh, Marilyn, you froze.
So obviously learn American.
Okay.
But I thought they have the two cultures. They maintain that Indian culture. We've been to weddings. We really have been a part of this. But they are American.
Yes, yes.
Credit to them. And I thought that this film really showed so much of that.
Yes. Yes, Marilyn, I'm surprised that if you gave them that education, by the time you were finished, they didn't say, "Do you have a nice Jewish girl for our son?"
Well, the funniest thing is, their son did not marry India. Yeah, he married a blonde white model who, by the way, they became divorced, and this was another whole issue.
Oh,
but they really identified with us as Jews, and we would talk about religions very often.
interesting. That's terrific. Thank you for that. That's great. Arlette, you got to mute.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
You can
There you
hear me
go.
now.
Yes.
Getting back to what she just said, I lived in Middlesex County, Edison, New Jersey. It was called Little India. And this is what happened when an Indian neighbor moved in, then all of a sudden the relatives came. And they still have it to this day. They have a big Indian festival annually. But I want to thank you for just a feel-good movie. And I wish that there was a love going on between the Frenchman and Debbie. I thought they were very, very compatible. But anyway, I found towards the beginning of the movie when the husband couldn't go to the school to speak with that gentleman,
Right.
the mother raised up to it and said, "I will go with you." And of course, his daughter didn't like that at all. And I thought that went very, very well, even though the daughter still didn't like what went on. But she had this inner.
Please mute your phones if you're not speaking.
Yeah.
She had that inner strength towards the beginning of the film by going there in place of her husband. And I liked the way the director, when she did go into New York, how, yes, she did it for herself. She had this inner strength. Everything was said. I won't repeat it. But I love the scenes going up and down the subway and the street scenes. And yes, people in India will say, yes, we have to come to America. I mean, it was done so well. The pacing of the movie was done so well. It wasn't too fast. It wasn't too slow. It was just correct. But again, I would have liked the fairy tale ending.
Of course.
Oh, and I just want to suggest, just to everybody, I just saw the movie Mom on Netflix, where Devi is the main actress. She was phenomenal in that too. Phenomenal.
That's her last film. That was her last film, her last
Mom.
role. Yes, and it's a very powerful one.
Very
film.
different. Very different storyline.
Yes, for her. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Linda, you had your hand up? Linda Hock? I thought I saw your little hand up. Okay, no. Anybody else? Anybody else out there? Amel, go ahead.
Unmute.
He's trying.
It was very important for her as a female to gain self-esteem. And once she gained self-esteem, then she could proceed in a normal fashion and treat her children and husband normally.
Yes, of course. Well, they will respect her. I mean, we also saw back in India, they lived well, but she also had a business and she was conducting this business and making money. she was self-sufficient, which I thought was very interesting, the way they posed that. And yet, even though she was doing that, the husband really wasn't acknowledging it because of this lack of communication. Just what Jackie brought in is her business was insignificant, and she was doing very well with that business. So, you know, it was another wrinkle in the film in terms of just what you're saying, in terms of the self-esteem. And had to, you know, it fortunately works its way out. Thank you, Mel. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Linda.
Maybe somebody can remind me when this occurred, but I remember something where I believe she was talking out loud and she said there's a benefit to speaking out loud when nobody understands you. It was somewhere in the movie. I was trying to remember when it happened. If anybody...
Well, there was that scene. I don't know if it was that scene, but there was that scene when she was angry.
Yeah,
and she was talking in Indian.
Right.
And yet in the middle of her talk, in the middle of her anger, she's ordering a coffee and something in English, perfect. She's ordering something, and Laurent points out to her, "Do you know what you just did?" And she didn't realize it.
Right.
Because it came out while she was angry. Yeah, it was a wonderful moment
like
where the English kicks in naturally for her. She wasn't even thinking about it, and that's the way it should be. Is a language, you know, even a second language kicks in that way. So it was terrific. It was terrific. I'm sorry, Susan Litt. Yes, it wouldn't happen in reality. Anybody else? Anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
Shelly, can I speak? It's Fern. I'm trying to get my video going.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Two thoughts. Number one, I didn't see the husband folded too fast for my liking. He had her as his ornament and his possession, his take for granted wife for so many years, and then all of a sudden this happens at the table at the wedding, and then he turns later and says, "Do you still love me?" It's like they left too much on the cutting room floor. Some scenes in between there. And the second thing, you know, everybody's talking about whether, you know, she went back to her husband. I don't think she went back to her husband because she was so very much in love with him. And I agree with Arlette. I would have loved that fairy tale ending too. I don't think she said at one point, she says, it's not about love, it's about respect. And at that point, I think that's all she was really looking for from him, because she was really bound to the culture and her family, I would say, more than her husband. I think if it was a choice between the chef and him alone, without family and culture and background and years and tradition embedded in her, she would have left. But she was a child of her culture and her family, and the traditions. And I think that's what made her go back with her husband. And she wanted his respect, I think, more than his love. And I didn't see the great love bond there.
Well, it probably, that's why I said you have to wonder what happens after. Is he really going to be committed to the way he feels at that moment? And chances are, you know, you're probably right. Is although he'll have to be careful about what he says in English at that point, because now she understands and can speak it as well. But yes, it is a matter of respect, and it is a whole cultural dissonance that we're dealing with there. I saw Linda, you had your hand up. You wanted to
Yeah, I wanted to add, we don't know the beginning of that marriage. It could have been an arranged marriage.
Oh, probably was. It probably was. But Linda Hock, did you have something you wanted to add? I'm sorry, Linda. You have to unmute. You have to unmute.
There we go. No, can't unmute.
It finally did.
There you
okay.
Go. Yes.
It did. I guess it thought it wasn't worthy to say. But anyway, we're talking about the husband folding so quickly. I don't think it was just the speech, because I think he was picking up on the chemistry,
Yes.
between, and he was seeing her in a whole different life with all these new friends. And I think he was getting worried there. So I think, it wasn't just a one thing. He was, they kept going back and forth, and the chemistry was just so, obvious, with that. And so he had quite a few clues there that he better come around pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting observation. Yes, it was, here she's got all this international group of friends and this good-looking guy. It's the competition is setting in. But yes, but I also agree with Fern that if she were alone, I think she'd melt in a minute. With Laurent, they'd open up an Indian French restaurant. I see that coming, but it just wasn't in the cards here because of the cultural dissonance and her need.
Oh, I agree to that
family.
too,
It's responsibility. It's also responsibility as well as respect. Yeah, Jack. I'm sorry. Who's
Ina.
Oh, okay.
In the beginning of the movie, he said he saw her and he said he had to have her. He flipped. So there was a love from him, but without the way it should be, but he really loved her. And don't forget the one other scene when the daughter calls her and says, where did you put my notebook? And she was able to tell her where it was.
Yes.
And so there were so many things that were so interesting about this movie in terms of relationships between children and family and the whole 9 yards. And I didn't think for a minute she was going to marry that guy, because that would have made us a Bollywood. Please.
Yes. Yes.
Message.
You're right. But you bring up a good point. She was a good mother. She was a very good mother.
Yes.
And that, to her son, and that's why when she was, late coming back, and he had gotten hurt, she felt so badly about that. And everybody, her husband was angry at her, and yet she couldn't tell him why. But she was, very, very, the son wound up, turning over very quickly, which he was a little boy. Anyway, Jackie.
Well, I was going to say exactly what Linda said. I agree 100%. And as soon as Fern, whatever it was you said about him folding so fast, Larry said it was fear. It wasn't anything else. It was fear. And that's exactly what I thought. I thought one of the really great things that she said, which kind of goes back to everything, and it's not just their culture, was in the speech she gave at the wedding. She talked about sometimes, or maybe it was to Laurent, I can't remember, sometimes seeing something old that's gotten dull and tired, when you see it in a new light, it makes you look at it differently. And I think that was part of it too. I think it was the kids, but I think that was a little bit of it too.
Oh, I think it was a big part. I think that's a great comment, because that's exactly the way she believed. You're going to look at me a different way, and it'll rekindle some of the things that were probably lost along the way.
I don't think he ever didn't love her. He just didn't know how to act. And they did a whole thing about that too, how being in love changes you. And he didn't realize that. He absolutely had no clue that she was feeling the way she did.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right. He didn't, because he couldn't communicate. Rosalie, then Marilyn. Rosalie.
I say so. Okay.
Oh, who's that?
The thing of it all is, her enlightenment was a terrible threat to him. It just shook everything up. It was against the Indian culture that they were living in. She came to this big country all by herself. I mean, I think the subway scene, she didn't know what to do. I can understand that. She overcame all these obstacles. She can do just about anything. Maybe she doesn't need him. She did at one point say something to him much in the beginning when he hugged his secretary or whoever it was.
Right.
Why don't you hug me?
Yeah. No, great comment. Thank you, Rosalie. Marilyn?
Interesting, someone brought up the fact of arranged marriage. And again, back to this person that we know very well, his boss, as I said, his two brothers were told they could not make a choice, and both of them, highly educated, had to go to India, and they were matched, both of them.
Fixed, yeah.
Wonderful marriages. So yeah, but definitely that was the end. Was not love. This time you're going to go and we're going to see to it that it's the right person. But also about love, it reminds me of Fiddler on the Roof when they say love. You know, what is love? You know, it's you are together, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are infatuated with one another. So
yeah, the feeling is love will come later. Love will come later.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When my son graduated from medical school, there were kids, there were Indian fellows who graduated with him who were going on a plane the next day to get the wife that the family had picked out for them and bring her back to this country. And there was a book written about that, bestseller. So that was 20 years ago. Whether it's still happening, I don't know, but that is true. There were at least a dozen young Indian men flying back to India to get the wives that were picked out there. So, you know, that is true.
Okay.
I wanted to make. I'm
wait,
sorry. This is Dora.
Oh, okay. Okay, Dora, go ahead.
Okay, no, what happened is that she couldn't make the end for her to run away with this French guy, even though it shows that they were very much like in love, sort of. But I mean, it was not correct according to their tradition. You know, a family is very important. She was like a good mother. She couldn't run away. It would have been a terrible ending if she goes with this guy that Arlette wanted at the end.
Yes.
Yes.
Because it would be like an American ending. If you see all these foreign movies, they don't
absolutely.
like a happy ending. None of them are like a happy ending, because life is not the happy ending.
No. And I have, before I get to you, Arlette, I just wanted to read the chat. It's been in there for a while. I got a chance to look at it. Joanne Brave had said an interesting comment. Her daughter was allowed to be disrespectful to her mother, which surprised her, especially being from India. I thought their children were taught to be very respectful. Well, they're children, and you're right, they are. But she felt superior because she spoke English, and therefore her mother didn't learn it, and therefore she took advantage. It sort of fits in with the story. But yes, the children are supposed to be that way. And also I do have to remind, because I am getting comments, you have to raise your hands. I'm hearing voices coming in from places I don't know. So yeah, you have that little hand sign you can put up.
I know. I have
if you're not on camera, so this way I could see it. I also have I have one announcement to make if anybody's interested. Ed said, some of you may know that Alice and he now live in Lake Worth. For those of you who know them, she plays the viola and is looking for other string players on an amateur level to play with. So if you know someone, let her know, and her address is in the chat. This is just a community aside. Okay. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program. Arlette.
Well, you know what? She absolutely adored and loved her children.
Yes.
That went beyond anything. And I think that was the most important thing to her, besides the marriage, keeping it together because of them. That is the Indian culture, to try to stay together and not divorce, even though I wanted the other fairy tale ending.
Yeah, family is important. Family is very vital. I mean, it should be in every society. And her family, she was very close with these children. It wasn't like she was distant. It was just that one problem which had to be fixed, which she takes it upon herself to fix.
Yeah.
That's the important element in the film.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Well, okay, this is great. Thank you. I will. Well, we don't always. The next one is not that kind of film because we're starting a new session. So for those
Yeah.
of you who haven't seen the new session we're starting, it's called She's All That and More, which this film is a great segue into our next session, because in every culture, cinema has played a big part in defining and redefining a woman's role in society, as we've seen here. They're beautiful, rebellious, romantic, intelligent, inspirational, forceful, misunderstood, but they are definitely all that and more. And what more can I say but to see them and discuss them at their best and their worst. So we have a number of films that will do both. And we start off in October, on October 12th. Fittingly enough, we will discover a new film. It is from Germany. It is entitled Barbara. And it's a very interesting film. It takes place in 1980s East Germany. Barbara is a Berlin doctor who has been banished to a country medical clinic for applying for an exit visa out of East Berlin. Deeply unhappy with her reassignment and fearful of her co-workers as possible Stasi. If you know, the Stasi are secret police in East Germany at this time. She's fearful that some of her co-workers may be Stasi informants. She stays aloof, but must find a way out. And it's a very interesting film that takes some very interesting twists and turns, and is directed by one of today's most prominent international directors, who's been nominated for an Oscar several times. And we saw his work, and we saw this this actress in the film Phoenix. Those of you familiar with the film Phoenix, this is the same director and same star. So I will look forward to seeing you next month for Barbara. That should be also a very interesting discussion. I thank you all for attending this evening.
Dankeschön, dankeschön.
A pleasure.
On behalf of all of us and the friends.
Dankeschön.
For those of you celebrating, have a very happy and healthy New Year.
You as
And
well.
I will see you in October.
And if you're not a member of the Friends,
Thank you.
$10, please become
Okay.
Friends of the Library, so
Yes.
we can continue programs such as this. Thank you
Yes, and
all.
there's a lot of good
Thank you.
programs.
Night,
Thank
everybody.
you, Fern.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Now I can practice my
Bye.
German
Night, all.
reading
Good
with the
night.
next movie.
Namaste.
Auf Wiedersehen.
as they